Hey guys, this is Rick Swiddup, and welcome to the final part of What If Yuji Had All for One. I'm sorry I haven't gotten around to this one, but yeah, I been slacking on this one because I kind of don't want to do it, but I figured I might as well get it over with, so yeah, let's just get started. Continuing where we left off, Gojo would have told everyone that he was going to fight Yuji alone. He didn't want anyone else to intervene, and that his style was to simply destroy Yuji without relying on anybody else or worrying about anybody else. He was going to do exactly that. In the downtime, he was going to train the other sorcerers as much as he could because he knew Yuji was going to be a formidable opponent. Even the first time they fought, Yuji was somewhat formidable against Gojo, even though he didn't beat Gojo. And on top of that, Gojo doesn't know the amount of curse techniques Yuji had collected for now, so it was only in his best interest to simply sit and wait, train himself and his students as much as he could, so that when the time is right and Gojo wasn't able to defeat Yuji, he would be able to do it when the time comes. Unknown to anybody, not even Yuji himself, Sukuna being inside of Megami's body, realizing that he's only 3 fingers strong. He has his regular curse technique, however, it's not as strong as he wants it to be. However, he has a flame curse technique. During this entire time, since he took over Megami's body, he's been doing nothing but relentlessly training himself in order to perfect this curse technique. It didn't take much, since the curse technique wasn't all that special. However, Sukuna was going to make it special. That was his genius in Jujutsu sorcery. It didn't matter what the technique was, you just had to be greedy. And that's exactly what Sukuna was. He made up for at least 1 finger by eating his own grave wax, and came across Yorozu. Even though it was a hard-fought battle, he would hardly come on top, being able to just barely take down Yorozu, as she would gift him one of his hand error tools. This was going to be difficult for Sukuna. He didn't know what to do. Some brat had taken his fingers and absorbed them. He was beyond livid. He was nowhere near the strength he originally was at. He feels like a complete fool. However, he wasn't going to let that stop him. Whenever he got the chance, he was going to go to the brat and kill him himself. As long as Urame was by his side, he was going to kill whoever stood in his way. He had been training his flame curse technique for a while now, to the point where it's completely mastered, even under this short amount of time, doing things Megami couldn't even fathom of doing. Urame had offered their body to Sukuna in order for him to take it over. However, Sukuna would tell Urame that that wasn't needed, and that he was going to do things himself. He knows, based off of Megami's memories, that the sorcerers plan on facing Yuji Itadori nearby in the future. So during that time, he will infiltrate whatever they have going on and attempt to kill Yuji in order to take his own body back. He will reclaim what's his and rightfully claim his soul back from Yuji. As time would continuously pass, Yuji would simply have his fun, doing whatever he wanted, killing people, gathering more points, and collecting more cursed energy for the barriers. It was almost time. The barriers were nearly full, and he had gathered enough cursed energy. He was going to merge all of that with himself and continue the culling games across the world. He couldn't wait. However, just then, Yuji could feel a large gathering of cursed energy heading his way at supersonic speeds. Before Yuji could even get himself together, he would see a hollow purple headed towards him at max speeds, catching him off guard. He would attempt to block it, however, it would blow his arms away, as Yuji would simply smile. He didn't think the Jujutsu sorcerers had that in them. He was going to make sure they paid dearly. Once he was finished with them, he was going to reshape everything. He had already killed Tengen, and they were the last thing holding Jujutsu Society together. Once he got rid of them, everything would go according to plan. He couldn't wait. As just then, Yuji would see Gojo Satoru walking straight forward without a care in the world, as if he already knew his victory was announced to him. Yuji would step down from the building he was on top of, walking towards Gojo as well. As they would stare at each other, Gojo would tell Yuji that he expected a lot of things out of him, but this was not one of them. He knew Yuji was a strong sorcerer, and he wanted him to come to Jujutsu High. However, Yuji is simply an evil person. There's nothing that would help him. There's no one that can save him. He simply needs to be put down like the dog he is. Yuji would then begin to laugh, telling Gojo that he can't believe someone like him is saying something like this to him. Yuji would then begin to say, Gojo Satoru, the weapon of Jujutsu Society. If anything, you should be standing in my shoes. They use you as a weapon when they want to get rid of something, and you just sit there and take it. Gojo would then laugh and say that he doesn't just take it. He has people that helps him and supports him, unlike Yuji. Yuji is alone, and that loneliness will get to him. Yuji would laugh and tell Gojo that it doesn't matter how lonely he is once he's at the top of the world. As Yuji would continue to laugh, he would then tell Gojo that he was tired of talking and that they simply need to get this over with. He was going to kill Gojo, and then the next would be his students. Once he kills Gojo, he's going to take his technique, and after that, whatever comes next is up for grabs for Yuji. Gojo would then laugh and ask Yuji, does he really think he can take his technique from him? As a matter of fact, does Yuji even think he could beat Gojo? Yuji would then laugh and say that this wasn't like the last time, as he would make hand signs, summoning Maharaga immediately. He would imbue Maharaga with electricity plus blood manipulation, telling Gojo that things were going to take a humongous turn. Things were only just getting started, and Yuji will finish all of this now. As Gojo will be the first to engage, sprinting straight towards Yuji, Infinity active, he would throw a punch straight towards Yuji's face, as Yuji would simply duck underneath it, as Maharaga would come and slash down onto Gojo, being stopped by Infinity. However, at the same time, the wheel on Maharaga's head would begin to spin. Yuji would laugh as he would use domain amplification, punching towards Gojo. Gojo would then laugh, telling Yuji that he's become a lot smarter since the first time they fought. However, this was simply going to slow down the process of Maharaga. Yuji would laugh and say that he knows. He wanted to take his time slowly killing Gojo, and he may keep him alive later to watch Yuji kill every last one of his students right in front of him. Gojo would then get pissed off as he would punch Yuji in the gut, as Yuji would let off a sinister smile, taking the hit head on, taking the blow with a smile on his face as he would throw a punch himself, aiming straight for Gojo's face, as it would crack Gojo across the face. Gojo would then send an elbow towards Yuji, attempting to counter the attack that Yuji had just sent. However, Yuji would catch the attack, continuously using domain amplification to push Infinity back, throwing yet another punch towards Gojo. However, Gojo would block the attack, but at the same time, Maharaga would be behind Gojo, sending an attack of his own with his executioner sword. However, Gojo would simply flip over Yuji, making Maharaga slam itself into Yuji, cracking him across the face. Yuji would be blasted back into a wall, as Maharaga would simply continue following up with Gojo. As Gojo would begin to smile, Maharaga would be relentless as it would try to combo Gojo, but Gojo would simply dodge and counter everything Maharaga was throwing at him. Maharaga would throw a punch, and Gojo would catch it, swinging Maharaga around right to where Yuji was and throwing a red. It would crash into both Maharaga and Yuji, with Maharaga losing half of his body. However, the wheel on top of his head would begin to spin once more as he would begin to regenerate his limbs, as Yuji would begin to laugh once again, telling Gojo that he'd better be careful, because once everything's said and done, Yuji's going to take Gojo's head right off his shoulders. Gojo would laugh and tell Yuji that he can try all he might, but nothing will happen. Gojo would continue his assault on Yuji, rushing straight forward as he would throw a punch, attempting connecting with Yuji's chest. However, Maharaga would step in between both of them, blocking the attack, as Yuji would spin around both of them, trying to land an attack on Gojo with domain amplification. He would send a strike towards Gojo's back. However, once again, Gojo would grab onto Maharaga and spin around, making Yuji hit Maharaga in the back, as Maharaga would simply get angrier, throwing another attack towards Gojo. However, he would simply dodge and parry attacks left and right. As they would continue their scuffle, they would continue to trade blow after blow, as Gojo would simply have to play defensively due to Maharaga. However, at the same time, he knew he needed to get rid of Maharaga. If Maharaga adapted to his infinity, who knows what Yuji would be able to do to him. He needed to finish this now. So Gojo would then do something that no one was expecting. He would begin to say the words domain expansion, as Yuji would immediately catch notice of this, de-summoning Maharaga, casting his own domain as well, as the two domains would begin to clash, as Gojo would take no time and immediately rushing in towards Yuji. Yuji would begin to laugh, calling Gojo a madman, reminding Gojo that if he loses this domain battle, his technique will be his. Gojo would laugh and tell Yuji that he swear he's not going to lose. As they would continue their hand-to-hand combat, Gojo would rush forward, sending a right straight towards Yuji's cheek, but Yuji would simply just dodge underneath it, attempting to sweep at Gojo's leg. However, Gojo would simply jump over the attack, trying to knee Yuji in the chest, but Yuji would flip backwards, dodging the attack altogether. He would rush back in once more, throwing a left at Gojo's torso. Gojo would catch the attack, sending another knee at Yuji's torso. However, Yuji would block that one as well. Gojo had never realized, but Yuji was incredibly strong at hand-to-hand combat. He was so used to Yuji using curse techniques, he wouldn't realize how strong Yuji actually was. They would continue fighting back to back, throwing punch after punch with one another, as both of them would throw a punch connecting to each other's faces, continuously crashing punches into one another, as Yuji would attempt to throw yet another punch once more. However, this time, Gojo would dodge underneath the punch, cracking Yuji across the face, dazing him quite a bit. He would then continue his assault, throwing a 3-hit combo, hitting Yuji in the face, as Yuji would attempt to retaliate, throwing an arm of his own. However, Gojo would grab it, pulling Yuji forward, cracking him across the chin with an elbow, spinning him around and throwing him into the walls of the domain. He would then rush forward as he would let off a devastating combo on top of Yuji, not letting Yuji get a breathing room, punching Yuji over and over until eventually he would throw Yuji once again into the center of the domain. However, with Yuji taking such a thrashing, his domain would begin to collapse, as Yuji would then take the sure hit effect of Unlimited Void. However, just like last time, it would begin to take one of the abilities of the souls inside of him, beginning to take Cursed Energy Discharge. Yuji would laugh, saying that was one of the most useless ones, as he would begin to laugh once more, telling Gojo that if that's all he has, they can continue. As Gojo would close his domain, Gojo would say that this wasn't nearly enough. He wanted to disable as many techniques as he possibly could. If possible, he wanted to try to disable the 10 shadows, but he doesn't know how it works. He doesn't know if Yuji's able to purposefully change the trajectory of the sure hit effect onto another one of the souls that he has gathered inside of him, or if it was just random. He couldn't tell at all. But Gojo needed to do something, so he would activate his domain expansion once more, as Yuji would do the same thing. It was a gamble for both of them. Gojo knew that if he was to lose the Clash of Domains, his technique would be gone forever, and he would die here. However, if he was able to continuously win the domain clashes, he would be able to effectively take out Yuji's techniques one by one. It was an incredible toll on his brain. However, he wasn't going to stop here. He was going to keep pushing until he won the fight, until Maharaga didn't exist. That was the only threat to Gojo, and he knew that. As the domains would begin to clash, they would begin to clash as well, throwing attack after attack. Yuji would rush forward, attempting to grab Gojo. However, Gojo would dodge out of the way, grabbing Yuji's arm, pulling him forward once more. He would punch him in the face, as Yuji would be staggered back. He would then use his other hand, punching Yuji in the gut, making Yuji cough up blood. As Yuji would begin to get irritated, he didn't understand it. Why was Gojo Satoru so powerful? Even without Infinity, he could barely put up a fight against Gojo. This wasn't what was supposed to happen. He wanted Gojo dead. Gojo was his only obstacle. He needed Gojo dead. If Gojo dies, everything else works perfectly. Yuji would scream out, cursing Gojo as he would throw another attack. Gojo would then laugh, asking Yuji if he was getting terrified. Yuji would tell Gojo that he doesn't know what he's talking about. He would tell Gojo that he was having the time of his life, as the attacks would continue one after another. However, due to the few attacks that he had taken earlier, before Yuji could even land another attack, his domain would collapse almost instantly, as Gojo's sure hit effect would take effect once more, this time taking away his sky manipulation technique. Yuji would kiss his teeth, realizing that he can't beat Gojo to hand-to-hand. Neither can he win against Gojo in a domain expansion battle, so he would have to continue relying on Maharaga. He would summon the wheel above his head, but he wouldn't summon Maharaga completely. He was going to bait Gojo into using as many attacks as he could, as well as hoping to get him to use Infinity more. He needed Maharaga to adapt as fast as he could so he can get rid of Gojo as fast as he could, as Gojo would shoot off a red immediately, not letting Yuji get another chance to think, as it would strike Yuji in the chest, sending him backwards. Yuji would attempt to catch himself, however, Gojo would use blue, re-attracting Yuji right back to him, as Yuji would then use blood manipulation, plus star rage, plus idol transfiguration, reinforcing his body as much as he could. Gojo would laugh, telling Yuji that did he forget that his attacks won't be able to reach him? As Yuji would send an attack, however, it wasn't aimed at Gojo, it was aimed at the floor below them, as a huge explosion would happen and dust would begin to spread around the battlefield. Yuji would then use hand signs, summoning Agito, imbuing Agito with blood manipulation plus star rage. He was going to finish this as fast as he could. Agito would sprint forward, going straight towards Gojo, as Gojo would believe that Yuji was coming straight at him. He could feel the cursed energy of Yuji, as he would get ready, but instead of it being Yuji, it would be Agito, throwing a punch straight towards him, as he would dodge out of the way. However, Yuji would be behind him as he would send a kick towards Gojo. However, it would be blocked by Infinity. But at the same time, the wheel on Yuji's head would begin to spin as Yuji would begin to smile once more. He would simply make it so Gojo was not able to expand a domain anymore. If Gojo would continuously expand domains, he would simply win the fight, so Yuji was not going to allow that to happen. As Gojo would use blue, attempting to pull Yuji forward, Yuji would use a reverse gravity manipulation on himself, pinning himself to the ground, as well as using Star Rage to increase his mass. At the same time, he would use Auto Transfiguration, transforming his hands into a bunch of whips, as he would slap the ground using his explosion technique, as there would be a slight delay and then an explosion, as more dust would begin to gather. Gojo would be getting tired of this. Yuji was simply hiding, and he needed him to come out, so Gojo would put his fingers together once more, screaming out domain expansion. However, this time, instead of expanding his own domain, Yuji would close the distance between himself and Gojo, making sure to touch him. He would then laugh, being at Gojo's back, telling him that as long as he makes contact with him, his domain shouldn't work at all. Gojo would then laugh, asking Yuji if he was so sure about that. As Yuji would use Auto Transfiguration, growing a hand out of his stomach and latching it onto Gojo, as they would begin to throw hands back and forth. Yuji would throw it right, attempting to crack Gojo across the jaw. However, Gojo would parry it, sending an attack of his own, cracking Yuji in the face, hitting him with a 3-piece combo once more. He would attempt to follow up with another attack. However, Yuji would block that attack, sending another attack of his own. They would simply go back and forth, throwing fist after fist, with each one being harder than the last. Gojo would smile, realizing that this was a fight he could actually go all out in. Yuji had gotten this strong, and he couldn't contain his excitement. He was going to finish this. However, unknown to Gojo, the wheel on Yuji's head was just continuously spinning. Each second inside of Gojo's domain would only cause Maharaga to adapt more and more to Infinity. However, Gojo was completely oblivious to it for now, as they would continue fighting over and over. Gojo would then grab the hand that was wrapped around him, ripping it off, as Yuji would be hit with a limited void once more. This time, it would take away his projection sorcery. Gojo would laugh, telling Yuji that was 3 of his abilities already. What was he to do now? As Gojo would attempt to close the distance once more, Yuji would be somewhat tired, so he would begin laughing. He finally got it, as Gojo would rush in once more, punching Yuji in the stomach, then punching him across the face, landing a 2-piece, pulling him forward, hitting him with another combo. As he would be about to land a finishing attack, the wheel on Yuji's head would drop into the ground, as from the shadow, Maharaga would reappear, with blood manipulation and electricity infused inside of him. He would slash at Gojo, as Gojo would be taken aback, as his arm would be completely severed off. The infinity around Gojo was no longer working for Maharaga, as Maharaga and Yuji would let off a devious smile. Yuji would then say, "Gotcha," as instead of panicking, Gojo would simply laugh, telling Yuji that he can't believe someone like him has him like this. This is the most fun Gojo has had since he's been alive. He was going to kick it up a notch, and he hoped that Yuji can hold on to it. Yuji would ask Gojo what the hell he was talking about, as Gojo would rush forward faster than he already was, sprinting straight at Yuji, going to hand-to-hand combat. He would hit Yuji across the face with an elbow, making Yuji spin around, as he would continue his combo, hitting him over and over, left, right, not giving up at all, as Maharaga would attempt to jump in between both Yuji and Gojo. However, Gojo would simply cock back his fist, as Maharaga would step forward, slashing towards Gojo. Gojo would simply dodge out of the way, throwing the fist, as it would rocket towards Maharaga, hitting Maharaga in the chest, landing a black flash. This would blast Maharaga back into Yuji, making them crash into one another. As Gojo would now be operating at 120%, he would rush in once again at Yuji. Maharaga would attempt to block the initial attack, however, Gojo would simply push him out of the way, kicking Maharaga across the chin, sending him flying into a nearby building. As Gojo would then use blue at maximum output, pulling Yuji forward, crashing the blue into him, while smashing his fist across his face. He would then continue to swing the blue around, gathering debris all around them, as Yuji would say that he's had enough of this. He would activate blood manipulation, using flowing red scale stack. Using shrine, he would then use dismantle, sending slashes at Gojo. However, they would simply be stopped by the infinity. However, Yuji would use this to close the distance between him and Gojo, beginning to use domain amplification once more, attempting to wear Gojo out some more. However, this was Yuji's biggest mistake. Gojo would laugh, telling Yuji that he wasn't done with his initial assault. Gojo would then grab onto Yuji's arm, hitting him with 2 quick jabs, pulling him forward and kneeing him in the stomach. He would grab onto Yuji's leg, swinging him around as he would throw him into the air. Charging a maximum output red, he would shoot it directly at Yuji. It would smash into Yuji's chest, pushing him backwards, as he would use auto transfiguration to modify his body for the red to go directly through it. He would laugh at Gojo, saying that attack wasn't worthwhile at all, as he would rush forward once again. However, Gojo would then laugh, telling Yuji that he still wasn't done. Yuji hadn't realized, but the blue from before hadn't dissipated yet. It was still around, as Gojo would continue using the blue, pulling Yuji straight towards that one, as Gojo would line up his attack at the same time, cracking Yuji across the face once more, landing yet another black flash. Yuji couldn't fathom it. Was Gojo holding back that entire time they fought the first time? Yuji didn't realize it before, but Gojo was holding back due to not wanting to kill the people inside of Shibuya. However, since there was no one around except for him and Yuji, he could go all out without worrying about anything or anybody. As Gojo would then begin chanting, 9 ropes, polarized light, Crow and Shiomyo, the gap between within and without, as he would bring the red that was still flying up back down, redirecting it, Yuji realizing way too late, as he was in the direct path of the red. If it were to hit him, he would crash into the blue, and the techniques would crash into one another with him being in the center of it. He could not allow that to happen. He already had the blueprint, and he was going to stop this attack no matter what. Yuji would then proceed to activate Mythical Beast Amber. Knowing what the technique does to his body, he needed this for an extra boost in power. Using Mythical Beast Amber, plus Blood Manipulation, plus Star Rage and Auto Transfiguration, he would charge at the red, striking it as hard as he could, as the attack would dissipate, and Gojo would be confused. As he couldn't believe it, Yuji just stopped one of his max output attacks. Even though he combined all those techniques together, he was still able to stop it, as Gojo would begin to laugh once more. However, unknown to Gojo, Maharaga would be right behind him. It would slash at him, taking one of his arms off once again. Being distracted in that brief moment would cause Gojo to lose everything. Yuji would then begin to chant, Scale of Dragon, Recoil, Twin Meteors, as he would send out a dismantle. However, Gojo wouldn't think much of it until it connected, going straight through his infinity. Yuji would laugh, saying that he guesses Gojo wasn't strongest after all. Gojo would fall to the floor, legs still standing, as his torso would drop to the floor. Gojo would let off a smile, realizing that even if he lost, it's everything for Yuji to be able to beat him. And on top of that, he forced Yuji to use a trump card, and he knows he did. Everything else was up to the rest of the students, as the Jujutsu sorcerers watching would immediately jump into action. As Yuji would stare up into the sky, he would see Yuta, Maki, Nanami, Ino, Inumaki, Todo, and Hikari. This was the last line of defense for the Jujutsu sorcerers. If they couldn't beat Yuji here, no one else could. However, none of them knew at the moment that Yuji was on a countdown. After using Mythical Beast Amber, Yuji would realize that his body was disintegrating. The only thing he could do right now was reinforce his body with cursed energy. However, if he didn't figure something out, the technique would tear through his flesh until he was an absolute crisp. He was going to finish this now. Yuta would start off the charge, immediately popping his domain expansion. They came with a plan, and they were going to enact it to perfection. Yuta, starting the charge, would immediately rush forward, swinging his sword at Yuji. Yuji would grab the blade, melting it almost immediately. This would shock Yuta. However, Yuji would attempt to follow up on the distraction. He would swing at Yuta as it would connect with his cheek, causing him to be bounced back quite a bit. However, using the momentum from the punch, Yuta would turn around, grabbing a sword, as Yuji would let off a cursed energy blast, sending it straight towards Yuta. Picking up the sword, Yuta would then be able to use sky manipulation, turning the attack back around, as it would crash directly into Yuji. Yuji would laugh, as the technique wouldn't do much damage. However, it still did damage. Yuji can't allow himself to take as much damage. He would need to play defensively until he could figure out a way for the technique to not render his flesh immobile. However, Yuta wasn't going to let up. He would rush in once more, attempting to exchange hand-to-hand with Yuji. He would throw the initial sword at Yuji, causing Yuji to slap it away. However, at the same time, he would grab another one, where Yuta would then rush forward. He would send a slash at Yuji. However, Yuji would do the same thing, attempting to grab the blade. However, this time, Yuta would reinforce the blade with more cursed energy, making it so the blade would connect with Yuji's hand. And even though Yuji was blocking the attack, it would strike directly through Yuji's hand, cutting his hand clean off. Yuji would turn around, asking himself how, as Yuta would do the same thing,
throwing the sword at Yuji once more, as Yuji would say that he's had enough. He would send dismantles directly towards Yuta. They would slash him, however, he would use RC2 to heal himself as quickly as he could, sprinting towards Yuji once more. Just then, as Yuta was right in front of Yuji, Yuji would use his reverse gravity technique, slamming Yuta into the ground. He would then use hand signs, summoning Agito, imbuing it with blood manipulation, the exploding technique, and as well as Star Rage. He wanted Yuta dead. He wanted everybody dead. He would send Agito straight towards Yuta, as Yuta would call on to Rika, as Rika would come out, blocking the attack from Agito. However, it would still push her back quite a bit. Yuta would then push himself off of the ground, forcing himself up as he would grab another sword. Yuta would then smile, realizing that now he's hit the jackpot. He would then use hand signs, conjuring up a maximum output Jacob's ladder. This is the technique he needed, something that would burn through Yuji's souls. Using the technique, Yuji would get hit by it directly. However, something would happen that Yuji himself wasn't even expecting. Not only would it damage Yuji himself, but the souls inside of Yuji as well. It would burn through half of Sukuna's soul inside of Yuji, burning through idol transfiguration altogether, as well as blood manipulation. As the attack would end, Yuji would sit there, absolutely dumbfounded. That attack did way more damage than he needed it to do. He couldn't take any more of this. However, at the same time, Yuta would then desummon his domain. As Yuji would attempt to rush forward, however, from behind him, he would be stabbed through the chest, directly in the heart, as Maki would stab him with the soul split katana. As doing the same thing, it would disrupt one of the souls inside of Yuji, cutting him off from Star Rage. Yuji couldn't believe it. In this one instance alone, he lost almost half of his techniques. In this katana, it wasn't something normal. It directly attacks Yuji's soul. This wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. He was already at wit's end. After fighting Gojo, he expanded a lot of his cursed energy. And with these guys, and using Mythical Beast Amber on top of that, he just couldn't take it anymore. It was too much going on, as Yuji's skin would begin to fry, cooking him from the inside. However, Yuji would not allow this to get him down. He was going to win this. It didn't matter what he did. As Yuji would then begin to laugh, as Maki would take the sword out of Yuji, kicking him in the back, sending him towards Yuta. As Yuta would strike Yuji across the face, hitting him with a combo, punch after punch. Yuji would attempt to use curse manipulation, however, Maki would follow up once more with Yuta, stabbing him with the soul split katana once more. As curse manipulation would then be deleted from his stock. During the training that they underwent with Gojo, they all knew about Yuji's souls inside of him, so they knew that Maki was going to play a huge role in this fight, as well as Yuta. If Yuta was able to copy Angel's technique, he would be able to strike Yuji with a Jacob's ladder, effectively extinguishing any curses inside of him. And since he's absorbed the techniques of cursed spirits as well, it would make perfect sense. Yuji was now down to his last 4 techniques, as well as Mythical Beast Amber. He didn't know what to make of this. It was too much to summon another Shikigami. He's burnt through his entire cursed energy reserves, so he was going to do an end-all be-all. Yuji would then use his explosion technique, touching himself all across his body, charging it up as much as he can. If he was to die here, he was going to take every single person here with him. He was going to become a nuke himself. Yuji would begin maniacally laughing, as just before he would be able to explode, he would hear the words, "Maximum output, frost calm," as a wave of ice would freeze over Yuji. As everyone would be confused, they would see Megami walking forward. They would ask where the hell he's been and that they've been looking for him. As Megami would tell the group that he was caught off guard by a special grade cursed spirit in the Shibuya incident. However, this person took them into their care and healed him up, so everything was all okay. He would then walk forward straight to Yuji, as Yuta would tell Megami to be careful. Megami would then laugh and tell Yuta that he's gotten a lot stronger since the last time they were together, so he doesn't need to worry. Yuji, looking from within the ice, would stare up, as he would begin to smile, realizing that wasn't Megami. As Megami would begin to laughing even harder, he would tell Urarame to lower the ice just a bit to where they could see Yuji's face. Yuji's body was completely fried, as Mythical Beast Amber had completely taken over his body. He was basically mush at this point. Yuji would then begin to laugh, telling everyone that he won't be defeated like this. His will continue. As surprising everyone, Yuji would break his hand free from the ice, pouring all of his cursed energy into one singular finger. His soul and everything with him. Everything was betting on this for Yuji. He would then rip the finger off with the other hand, as he would tell Sukuna that he leaves everything to him. As Yuji's body would wither away, everyone else would look on confused. Sukuna would simply laugh. They would ask Megami what the problem is, as Megami would grab onto the finger. He would stare over at the other students. As he would let off a huge smile, he would eat the finger, and Yuji had attempted to take over Sukuna's body in this moment, or be the main soul. However, he didn't realize, combining the other Sukuna's fingers with him, his soul was stronger than Yuji's at the moment. So instead of Yuji taking ownership over the body, Sukuna would continue to reign over, absorbing the technique of All for One as well. Having access to gravity technique and 10 shadows, Megami would then begin laughing. As Yuta would have a troubled look on his face, he knew something was wrong. From the beginning Megami walked in here, something was off about him. And now the worst possible outcome has come into the picture. Sukuna would then fully retransform his body, going into his fully incarnated state. He would look at the Jujutsu sorcerers and ask them, shall they continue? They had already expanded so much cursed energy, and at the moment, they were fighting an almost fully powered Sukuna. What were they going to do? Telling them that he's feeling amazing. So for now, and only right now, he's going to give them the chance to walk away from this. However, when the time comes, he's going to retake his place as the King of Curses, reshaping the entire Jujutsu society back to what it was during the Heian era, with no Gojo Satoru in his way. No one even comes close to the strength Sukuna has, and on top of that, he's inherited the technique of the boy. He was completely unstoppable, and he was feeling extremely generous right now. However, in due time, he was going to reclaim everything. He would tell the sorcerers good luck, as he would simply walk away with Urarame directly by his side. The sorcerers knew that if they were to engage into a battle with Sukuna right now, they would all die and lose. Things weren't looking good at all, so they would regroup with themselves, retreating for the moment. What was going to happen further down the line? Kenjaku's plan was disrupted. Sukuna was now alive, but now at full power. There was nothing they could do at all. What was going to happen in the future? What was going to happen to Jujutsu Society? They would have to figure it out, and I think that's where I'm going to end it. I know I'm ending it like this, and it's like a what's going to happen later, but yeah, I kind of like it, and I won't lie, I rushed this part, so it might be all over the place, but I don't like this what if, but I hope you guys like this what if. And I'm thankful for you guys being supportive for this long. And again, thank you for 3K. I haven't made any kind of specials, and I don't know what kind of specials I would do. But yeah, if you guys can come up with something, I'll try to do it for you guys. And again, I'm sorry for not uploading as often as I should. But yeah, I'm trying to get back into it. I just have a lot of stuff going on. That's it. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.